Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Pretty good here, and welcome to the channel. Hey, today I want to get on here and talk about the controversial topic of a 4x4 versus a 4x2 Tacoma. You know, mine, the one right there, is a 4x2. The one over there that I test drove recently is a 4x4. Now, I took a lot of heat when I bought the 4x2 rather on the channel. Everybody said, oh, it's not a real truck. You've got to have a 4x4, even if you don't need one. So I thought I'd go through and talk about the differences, the advantages to each, if you will. A 4x2 versus a 4x4. And then what you should consider if you're going to get one or the other. So the first thing is, and we're going to talk about the 4x2, is they are cheaper. It costs less money for the 4x2 because, frankly, they have less parts. It doesn't cost as much to build them, so you don't have to pay as much to have one. Next up, they have better fuel economy due to less weight. Since there are fewer parts on a 4x2, they obviously weigh less than a 4x4 because everything else is the same. The engine, the build, all that kind of stuff. So they weigh less. It'll cost you less to drive one because you won't be filling it up as often. It doesn't burn as much gas. It's not as hungry as its heavier sister, the 4x4. Next up, and this might be a little controversial, the 4x2 is stronger. Now, what do I mean by that? It's stronger because it has less weight. That means you can put more in the bed, you can haul more, and you can tow more because they have less weight than the 4x4 does to start with. Now, as an example of that, I'm going to use the 2018 Tacoma Off-Road. The 2018 Tacoma Off-Road 4x2 weighs 4,180 pounds. Now, that's curb weight, 4,180 pounds. Where its heftier sister weighs 4,445 pounds. So you lose a little bit of your towing and payload capacity before you even put anything in it. Something you might want to consider if you do a lot of towing or your marginal on your towing weight or your payload even. I mean, they don't really haul that much in the bed to begin with. Next up, the two-wheel drive is simply cheaper to maintain. It's cheaper to maintain because you have less parts. You have less things that you need to service. Obviously, the 4x4 has more internal workings, so it's going to cost more money to maintain. Next up, and this is marginal, I think. I mean, we're not talking about thousands of pounds in difference here, but it is a talking point, and that is that the braking distance is shorter in a 4x2. Now, the reason being, we go back to weight again. The 4x4 is heavier. It takes longer to stop a heavier weighted truck than it would a lighter weighted truck. I mean, it makes sense, right? The bigger and heavier you are, the longer it's going to take you to stop. So it'll take you a shorter distance, if that concerns you, to stop in the 4x2. Now, this is probably the biggest thing because I think a lot of people, at least in warmer climates, buy 4x4s when they don't need them and they're never going to use them. And that is, there is less to worry about in the 4x2. And what I mean by that is you have to keep the seals in the 4x4 lubricated. You know, all those seals and bits and pieces and stuff that make up the 4x4, if you never put it in four-wheel drive, they're not going to get lubricated. That means eventually they're going to dry out and they're going to leak. And when that happens, you're going to have bigger problems. Again, more maintenance costs. Now, the rule of thumb is, and I've heard a couple different things, you need to put or activate the four-wheel drive at least every, I don't know, a few months, 2 or 3. I've also been told by some people that it should be done once a month. And that's probably just because it's a good measuring stick. You know, once a month, when the month changes, go out, turn your four-wheel drive on, drive it for just a little bit, and don't forget to turn it off because you certainly don't want to drive a 4x4 very far on dry pavement or you're going to eat up your tires. Another expense. So drive it for just a little bit. Make sure that you get everything nice and lubricated so that you don't have any maintenance problems with your 4x4. Next up, let's talk about the advantages of a 4x4, because not everything is bad, right? First off, a 4x4 has superior off-road capability. You know, when it comes to mud and water or crossing, I don't know, maybe a stream or a river, I've seen people do it. I've seen people drive in them. I don't know why, but they do. I guess because they can. Or steep inclines, obviously a 4x4 is going to be more beneficial. Now, I'm not saying that you can't take a 4x2 off-road. Of course you can. But it's not going to be able to handle the extremes like a 4x4 would. So a 4x4 wins. If you're any kind of an off-roader, you drive around in a lot of mud, snow, ice, that kind of stuff, definitely the 4x4. Next up, they do have improved towing capability when it comes to slippery inclines. Something like a boat ramp. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. I have. Have you ever seen pictures of a truck that they've either latched onto and they're pulling out of the lake, or it's sliding backwards into the lake because it can't handle pulling the boat because it's only got two-wheel drive? Obviously, if you have four wheels touching the ground, you're going to be able to pull out much easier than you will if you're just powering the back two tires. So on any kind of a slippery incline for towing things like boats, or even going up hills with a camper or a heavy trailer or something like that, obviously having four wheels contacting the ground with all the torque and the power directed to each one of them is going to be beneficial over having a 4x2. Again, not saying that you can't do it in a 4x2, but it makes more sense, and you can rest a little easier if you're using a 4x4. I mentioned before, driving in the snow and ice. You know, for many, many years, I lived in Ohio. We had winters, we had snow, we had ice. I've driven everything in those conditions: front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, sports cars, two-wheel drive trucks, four-wheel drive trucks, and I will say it is much, much easier to drive a four-wheel drive truck, particularly in snow. You know, once you get over about 3-4 inches and it starts to pack down, you do much better with a four-wheel drive in those kind of conditions. So I certainly understand, if you're from a cold climate, why a 4x4 would be important. Let's see. Another benefit, you know, we talked about the weight being a disadvantage, but there is an advantage to that. And that is that the 4x4's extra weight contributes to better grip on the road. It's a heavier truck. You've got more downforce on the road, particularly, once again, in bad weather, even in wet or slippery weather. A 4x4 is going to give you a little bit more grip because it's heavier to begin with, pushing down on those tires. Now, I do want to mention one major disadvantage to the 4x4 while we're here, and that is overconfidence. You know, again, coming from up north, I remember being on the freeways, you know, in my 4x4, and I'm driving, you know, probably with heavy snow, I don't know, 20, 30 miles an hour on the freeway, maybe, and somebody in a 4x4 is in the fast lane, or what they think is the fast lane, because you can't see the lines on the road, and they go whizzing by at like 65 mile an hour, which is all fine until you have to hit the brakes or turn. Then we're all equal. 4x4, 4x2, it doesn't matter. Once you take your foot off the gas, it's all the same. So be careful. If you're driving a 4x4, just realize that it does have limitations. Just because it's a 4x4 doesn't mean you're invincible. So why choose one over the other, right? As I mentioned in the beginning, right there, I had a 4x2 because I live in a warm climate, wasn't looking to do any off-roading or anything at the time. So why would I spend the extra money, pay for extra fuel, have the extra weight, have the extra wear if I didn't need it? And I didn't. That's why I got the 4x2 right there. But now we're going to get the 4x4. That's a whole different video. So why choose one or the other? Well, first of all, what do you really need? You know, I'm getting a 4x4 over there because I plan on doing some off-roading. And I wanted something different for the channel, to be honest. But I want something that's going to be able to handle the capability, or the conditions, rather, of what I'm going to use it for. Secondly, where will you be driving? Are you going to do any off-roading? Do you do any boating where you're going to be pulling boats in and out of a lake? Do you go up a lot of steep inclines while you're hauling stuff? Do you live in a winter climate? Next up, do you want or need to spend the extra money for the 4x4, even if you don't need it? Just know going in, it's going to cost you more money for maintenance, it's going to cost you more money to get it, and it's going to cost you more money to upkeep, which kind of goes along with maintenance. The other thing is, if you get a 4x2, I'm going to mention this because it's kind of funny, can you stand the heat? You're going to get a lot of crap because for some reason, manhood is measured by how many wheels turn on your truck. I don't know why that is, but it is. Me personally, didn't really bother me too much. But if it bothers you, you might want to get a 4x4 no matter what. And the last point that I'll mention, it's always better to have the tools that you might need rather than not have them when you do. You might want to think about that, whether or not you get a 4x4 or a 4x2. Anyway, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Are you a 4x4 guy no matter what? Even if you live in the tropics? Let me know. As usual, appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the web. Have a great day. Bye.